Hey, Christ the Redeemer, this is Matt. I just wanted to shoot a quick video instead of writing a lengthy email. I wanted to just try a different means in communicating with you, and so you can see my face, hear my voice as it relates to the weekly email. And instead of writing my reflections that I usually include in my weekly email, I am just simply copying and pasting an excellent article by Paul Tripp. He has a weekly email that he sends out every Wednesday, and if you haven't subscribed to it, I encourage you to subscribe to it. I'll include the link in the email itself. But in that, he talks about what it means to be the church. And from the very beginning of this coronavirus, I've encouraged people that this time of isolation, this time of quarantining, as it relates to the church, is really going to cause or should cause people to really start to think through how they view the church. What is the church? Is it merely the Sunday gathering? I would argue that that's extremely important. The Sunday gathering is extremely important because we are called to come together and worship and edify one another, to build one another up in our faith. But it continues throughout the rest of the week, Monday through Saturday. And I know a lot of people talk about that, but it really does behoove us as Christians to think through, how do I view the church? If I can't worship with my brothers and sisters on Sunday, what does my Christianity look like? What does it look like without that, focal point of my life? And as it relates particularly to 1 Peter, I think, we have to remember that these folks are dispersed throughout the Roman Empire, and they had to ask those same questions. Like, I'm not able to get together with my friends that I hung out with in Jerusalem anymore. I'm not able to be in community with them. And Peter says, priest up. Think about your exile as elect people of God, called to be priests of all believers, right? That every single one of us has been called to be a priest. And I wanted to share Paul Tripp's article with you because I think it is so fundamental. It's a fundamental push against so much of our understanding, implicitly and explicitly as Christians, as we live in North America, what it means to be a Christian. And oftentimes, unwittingly, I think a lot of times, but still nonetheless the case, that we have imbibed a culture of consumerism, a culture of passivity in our Christian understanding, and especially as it relates to the church. And so I want all of us to read that article so that we're on the same page of what it means to be a Christian community of faith, for one. For two, I wanted to share this quick quotation with you from a Christian social psychologist named Christina Cleveland. And she talks about this identity-shaping aspect of the Christian life because, yes, we are called to be priests, but we're not priests by ourselves. We are a priesthood. Like a neighborhood, we are a priesthood of all believers, that we are priests in community with each other, and priests need to encourage each other. I said that you're my priest, I'm your priest. We're all priesting together in community, and I couldn't help but think that process of realigning our identities with who we are and how we operate in the world, it's difficult. It's difficult to think about, now I'm a priest, and what does that mean? And so I wanted to share this quote with you from Christina Cleveland. She says this this is a book called Disunity in Christ. And she says this: the act of adopting a common identity that supersedes all other identities is a daunting, even painful one. However, research shows that it is the key to true identity. It is consistent with Jesus' teachings that the household of God is to take precedence over all other households, even the nuclear family, that we are no longer identified by, I am just a wireman, or I am just, you pick your last name. Instead, we are identified as Christians, as the family of faith. Now, that doesn't mean that these family identities aren't important, but that the household of God is to take precedence over all other households, all other identities. And she says this: the act of adopting a common identity is a daunting, even painful one. And she goes on to say this: to embrace our identities in this new common family of faith We must engage in the difficult process of lessening our grip on the identities that we have idolized and clung to for far too long. Many of us, myself included, have grown up in households that identified ourselves with a particular college team, for example, or a particular socioeconomic level, or a particular ethnic, racial identity. And this changing, not saying that those are unimportant. We can still root for our college teams. We can still take pride in the fact that I was born in Ohio, grew up in Kentucky, now live in South Carolina. Those are all wonderful things, which I'm thankful for. But it's a process, a difficult process of lessening our grip as though that's the most important thing. Your vocation, what you do for a living, is not your primary identity. The sport in which you play is not your primary identity. The team which you root for is not your primary identity. And our culture is seeking out to identify ourselves with a particular group, and it causes us to grip real tightly to those things. And we have to lessen our grip on that, to embrace our identities in this new common family of what it means to be a Christian. And then she finishes by saying this: in many ways, this difficult process will jar our souls, wreaking havoc on the satisfyingly homogeneous existence in which we were rooted. In other words, she's saying that it's really easy for us to, and it's satisfying to be in a group of people that are just like us. It's safe. It brings a lot of help to our own self-existence. It's going to jar our souls when we say, you know what, I'm not going to gather around people that just vote the same way I do, or talk the same way I do, or live the same way that I do socioeconomically. At first, she says, it will feel painfully unnatural because we have lived outside of our true identities as Christians for so long that the truth seems wrong. These are powerful words, and that it's going to jar our souls when we start to open up our lives and are vulnerable to other people. And that's my desire for us as a church, is that as a priesthood of all believers, that we would be vulnerable, transparent, that not only letting people into our lives, but also pursuing other people. I long for us to be a church that pursues each other through phone calls, through texting, through emails, and pursuing each other as priests to say, how is it going with your soul? How are you and Jesus doing? I pray that would be the primary vocabulary of our church, that we would ask each other, how are you and the Lord doing? How is your relationship with Jesus right now? How are you trusting Him? How are you keeping in step with the Spirit? That it's not, and at first it's going to seem unnatural. At first, it's going to seem like this is really weird to talk this way. Yes, it is weird, because we have grown so satisfied with this superficial living that our culture encourages us to live in, when all of us are longing for that deep community. But it's going to take people to be uncomfortable. If you'll remember from my sermon yesterday, I said that being a priest is uncomfortable. It calls us to go to uncomfortable places, not just alleys and dark places where there's need for light, but also uncomfortable places in conversation, to where we love each other enough to ask each other the hard questions, to care enough to pursue each other in relationship. And so I just wanted to shoot this brief video to encourage you to press on towards being a priesthood in community, that you are not by yourself, but that to grab somebody to go along with you, to say, hey, I have a heart for this ministry. Maybe it's human trafficking. Maybe it's adoption and orphan care. Maybe it's fostering. Maybe it's international missions. Maybe it's any number of things that is needed in our world. I'd encourage you to lock arms with someone in our church and to go and to pursue these things together. So I love you all so much, and I just wanted you to hear this from me and to hear this quotation. It really impacted me this morning as I read it, and I wanted to share it with you. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.